Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and make our cannon game right here and start us off. You can see we got a blank slate right here, no code, alright, and of course the way that I'm doing it right here I won't be able to show you the running of this program, but it doesn't mean that you can't, okay, so just keep that in mind as we do this. And also, as you're doing your code, always remember to test it after you put in every new line of code. Now, in this assignment, again, I won't be able to do that, but I will tell you when you should do that, okay? So, the first thing we're going to want is to just set up our p5play structure in this JavaScript program, okay? So, I'm going to give myself a few notes just to show that structure. So, right here at the top, we would definitely want to put our universal variables, okay? And hopefully you can spell better than I can. Then I'm just going to give myself a few extra lines of code right there, and we know after we define our universal variables, then we will have the setup function, okay? And then we'll make the setup function here shortly, but after the setup function, then you run the draw function. And then after your draw function, down here at the bottom is where you have customized functions. And of course, these notes are not necessary for you. I put them in there so that I can see them and refer back to them, and I can see the structure as I continue to put in more code. But remember, at this point, you wouldn't need to run anything because none of the code that I just put in did anything to the code. Now to start off, like I said, we're going to make a canvas first. We're not worried about any variables or putting anything on the canvas. The only thing I worry about right here is, can I put a canvas on the screen? So to do that, we will need the setup and the draw function for this. Well, maybe just the setup function. I don't know that we really need the draw function, but I'm going to make it anyways just to get us started on this video game, okay? So first up, we're going to make a function. So of course that's spelled F-U-N-C-T-I-O-N, and you need to make sure that your spelling is correct whenever you put any code in. Notice the code that I put in is all lowercase code. So you're going to want to make sure that your code is all lowercase for function. If you uppercase anything in there, it's going to throw things off. In addition to that, after we say on line 6 for me that we are making a function, we're going to make the setup function, and well, we're going to call it setup, okay? Now after that, I need the fancy bracket, this parentheses, and then after that, the fancy brackets, okay? Now you saw I just had to put that in myself, which means that I just went down a line and then put in that closing fancy brackets, and you notice right there I just gave myself a few extra lines of code in case I need it. And then right here on line 7, I'm just going to put a tab right there so that my code is indented, okay? So remember on this, this is indented for me because I want my code to look good. And you should want your code to look good as well. So make sure that you indent your code properly. Now at this point, having put in the setup function on line 6 and closing it on line 8, you kind of see there as well that the fancy bracket is being underlined. And then you can kind of see up here, after I have the setup function, I have the opening fancy brackets right there. It's just telling you that, hey, these two fancy brackets are aligned, they're associated, they're related to each other, they're connected. And everything you put in between this opening fancy bracket right here and this closing fancy bracket right here, anything you put in between there is going to be part of that setup function. So we're going to need this in the future because we are definitely going to be putting in if statements well, it'll be in our draw function actually. But again, it'll just kind of do this for us. On your computer, it may actually kind of circle these for you. I don't really know. But again, did I just put in a line of code? Yes. Is it going to show anything? It will not, but you can at least run it and see if there's going to be any errors. I recommend running your code after you put in every new line of code, okay? And now that I've got that setup function, let's come down here and put in the draw function. So function, F-U-N-C-T-I-O-N, space, and we do name that space there, and we're going to call this the draw function, which is just part of the p5play structure. Again, it's not really my doing, it's p5play's. That's how they would want you to structure any video game that you use. And of course, this is still JavaScript. Now, of course, I just put that draw function in, so I highly recommend running your program. If it doesn't work, don't continue with the code that I'm going to be putting in this, okay? You need to stop right now. If your code is not working, fix it before you do any more code. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's not very much code right there. It's not. But don't move on until you have your code working, because in the future, when we get 100 lines of code, if you put in, I don't know, 6 or 7 lines of code, and you're like, man, I'm running it, and it used to work, but now it doesn't work anymore, it's going to cause a lot of problems. So make sure after every single line of code, as long as it's not a note, right? Like I have on lines 1, 5, 12, and 18 right now. These are notes, and you know they're notes because they have the double slash right here. So they are notes. Now there's other ways to show notes with the slash asterisk slash, and that's if you have notes on multiple lines. We're not dealing with that right now, nor will we in this assignment, unless we want to just kind of test some stuff out. But having this, now I am ready for my canvas. Okay, so this is setting up the canvas, and by putting this canvas on the screen, again, it's not going to show anything, but what it will do, if we run this after I get the canvas on there, is at least we'll be able to see if I've made any mistakes in my typing, which I do sometimes, okay? So this is a new, so N-E-W-C-A capital C, A-N-V-A-S, parentheses. Now inside the parentheses, you want to put in the size of the canvas that you want to have. I'm going to go with 500. Now this first number, 500 right there, is the width of my canvas in pixels, okay? And then the next number, which I am also going to use 500, I'm just going to make it a square. I have 500. That's the height of my canvas. Width and height. Width is first, height is second. 500 by 500 canvas. And I close that parentheses, and then I have my semicolon showing the end of that line of code. Now again, did I put in a line of code? Yes, I did. Am I going to put in more lines of code? No, I would not if I were you. Run your program and make sure that it works. Because even at this point, some students, and this is a very common mistake, even on this assignment, where students capitalize, or they do not capitalize that C right there. And again, that's a very common mistake. Now it's easy to fix right now while we only have a few lines of code to check. We're really only one because we made sure that the other lines of code that we put in were working. But it's this one line of code, okay? So you need to go through this character by character and make sure that it's good. Because if you don't, then you're just kind of guessing, and as you go on, if you were to continue putting in code and you have an error on this line, then it's not gonna work, and then it's gonna be even more difficult to find your error. So watch what happens right here. Again, it's a lowercase c. This didn't change colors for me, but I believe it does for you guys. So make sure that your C for canvas is capitalized. Again, I can't stress that enough, because if you don't, it ends up being it's just a very common error we've been seeing with students. So please do not do that. Make sure it's capitalized there. So I'm going with a 500 by 500 pixel canvas right here. Run your code. Again, you're not going to see anything because the default background color for the canvas is white. Now, if you have your screen, if you have the colors reversed or inverted like I do, where I have a black background, it is possible you may see that white background for you, but I'm going to stick with this, okay? And if you can't see it, again, don't worry about it. We're going to show that. So next up for us, we're going to come down here to the draw function, and what are we going to put in? Pretty much every draw function that we ever make, we're going to put in the clear command. So C-L-E-A-R, no spaces, open parentheses, close parentheses, and then the semicolon right there. Did I just put in a line of code? Yes, I did. Am I going to test it? Well, I can't, but you should. You should test that code, okay? So the clear command, all it's going to do is it's going to take every frame from the draw function, and do remember, the draw function is running at 60 frames per second. That's really, really fast. And if you don't clear things, it's going to kind of create a tracing sometimes with some of the stuff that we're going to be putting onto the canvas. So test that out, make sure it works. If you get any errors, you know you've made a mistake. Okay, but are you going to see anything? Nope, unless you have an error. Because right now we haven't actually given the background any color, which is what we're going to do next. And again, this has still been a very, very common mistake for us when students come to me. They're like, Mr. Sal, what is going on with my code? Even in this program this small. Background. Okay. Now this is all correct. This should work. Open parentheses. So background. BACKGROUND. There is a mistake that usually happens with background. Okay. Now inside the parentheses, I've got this apostrophe right here. And let's go ahead and go into our hex color picker. I'm going to make this, I don't know, pretty much like a day background. Now there are some students that are like, I would like a night background. They like a darker color here, or maybe even like a purplish color. The truth is, I don't care if you choose pink or red or orange or yellow. Whatever your background color is, that's completely up to you. I'm going to go with something a little bit more, I don't know, realistic, I guess, or video gamey, because if someone's going to be playing my video game, I want them to look or feel pretty good inside, and I'm going to choose warmer, feel-good colors like this color right here, which I would consider a sky blue. Now it's showing the hex code right there. I don't really need it. Over here, I can copy it directly just by clicking on that, well, copy button. And now it's copied in there, so I come back into my program for the background color, and I press Control V, and it pastes it into that background color for me. If I wasn't able to do Control V like I usually do on my iPad, then I would have to actually memorize that or write it down somewhere. Now after that, you notice I closed it with this final apostrophe and the final parentheses right there. And again, just notice that it's underlined, which shows that it's related to this opening underlined parentheses right there, which is important for us, okay? So go ahead and run this code, and you should see a background that is now this color for the canvas. A full canvas for me, which is 500 by 500. But here is the mistake. It's the G. A lot of students are still coming to me saying, Mr. Sell, what is going on with my code? It's the G. So what happens is if you get rid of the G, now it thinks that you're looking at a background that's either a function or usually a variable. It's like, what the heck is background? And if you run this code, you're going to get that error. It's going to say background. I don't know the crap that is in some form or another. And by the way, students have not been looking very closely at that, but if you do, you'll see, if you just look at this more than half a second, you'll see it's showing you BACKROUND, but remember it's background with the G, so you need to make sure that G is right there, okay? So again, this is pretty crucial for us because if you don't put that in there, or if you miss that G, you're going to have an error. But again, don't do any more coding until you get that working, because if it's not working, then putting in more code is not going to work either, okay? Now the last thing we're going to put on here, just so we don't have to worry about it in the future, is some world gravity. Okay, so I'm making that note there in the canvas. Sorry, in the setup. Why am I putting in the setup? Because I want it to always be there. I want it there when the player begins the game, and I want it there when the player ends the game as well, okay? It's part of the setup. It's there initially for the player when they start, no matter what happens. I don't want it to be based off of what's happening in a specific frame or what the player is doing. I just want it to be there, which is why it's going in the setup function, just like everything else that we would want in the setup function, okay? So what is the code for world gravity? Hopefully you remember that, and my code is, well, it's kind of, or my note is kind of a hint right there, but it's world.gravity dot, and we're going to give it the Y. Now Y, remember, is up or down, and we're going to say we're going to pull it downwards, and I'm going to use the I guess it's kind of the gravity constant in actual physics, 9.81, but you can put in whatever gravity you want, okay? Now remember, 9.81 is going to pretty well simulate real life. I believe that would be 9.81 frames per second squared, whereas in real life it's more like 9.81 meters per second squared. The truth is, I don't really know if it's like frames or some other measurement that they're using in here, but this is going to work for us. Now go look what I did right there, right? Line 10 now is a new line of code, and run it, okay? Make sure that it works, make sure that there's no errors. Here is another error that we've been seeing quite a bit with students. So see on line 11 where I've got this fancy bracket, closing the setup function. How do I know it's closing? Because up here I see that it's underlined with this opening fancy bracket on line 6. So right now my setup function runs from line 6 to line 11. which is shown by the underlined fancy brackets. But what we're seeing is students are putting a fancy bracket right here after the canvas. And remember how I put this world gravity into lines 9 and 10 for me? Students are just kind of putting this in, and then they're putting this fancy bracket down here because they see that I have it, okay? Notice, I did not put in this fancy bracket on line 8 until I was trying to show you the error. If you put this in there right there on line 8 and then line 11, see how it's not underlined right there? Okay, it's not underlined for me, whereas line 8 fancy bracket, closing fancy bracket, is underlined, which shows that it is part of a set of opening fancy brackets and closing fancy brackets. Line 11 is not showing me that, which means that right now on line 11, this closing fancy bracket is not associated with anything. Now, I forget what kind of error you will see, but I assume it's going to be related something to world or gravity, or even maybe the Y right there, okay? So make sure that you have fancy brackets placed exactly where they should. And by the way, it's a lot easier for me to help you guys if you show me your code and it's formatted in proper coding etiquette. Meaning, notice over here, line 7 is indented, line 9 is indented, line 10 is indented. Why are they indented? Because they're part of the inside of that setup function. So if I were to see on line 8, this fancy bracket right here, it's a lot easier to notice, oh, there's one right here on line 8, and what the crap is this one on line 11? Actually, line 8 is the bad one. So that's a lot easier for me to determine and help you by looking at your code, and it's a very quick find because of coding etiquette, okay? So make sure this looks good. Again, make sure it's working. Make sure your background is whatever color you chose for it. My color was this light blue color right here, but you can choose whatever color you want. Some students even have chosen black, and that's up, again, all that is completely up to you guys, okay? But this is good enough to get the canvas set up for us. From here, we're gonna move on from there, okay? Let's see, what is the next assignment? We're gonna add the ground to this. So we'll do that, but we'll do that in the next video, okay? Let's see if I can make this bigger for you guys, though. Well, I don't know. That's kind of all of our code right there. I made the font size bigger just so you guys can see it, if that helps you out, okay? So thanks for watching. I'm Mr. Sal. If this helped you guys out, give it a quick thumbs up and a like or a subscribe or whatever the crap you want to do is up to you, but we'll see you in the next video.